Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Taylor. I'm a Senior Product Manager with Entrust Datacard, and my colleague is a Sales Engineer with Entrust Datacard, Brad Cochran. We're really happy to be here. It's been a great last 2 days sitting in a lot of the presentations. What I wanted to talk about this afternoon was really talking about what does it mean to really provide kind of an omni-channel experience to your bank consumers. So let's take the next kind of 20 minutes, go through that. With that as well, we're going to kind of pause in the middle. I'm going to get Brad to kind of walk through a video, or sorry, not a video. A video will be back up, but actually go through a live demonstration of leveraging a trusted identity on a mobile device in a use case around online banking. So with that said, one of the big things is that digital banking, and we've heard this for like the last day and a half, has become increasingly important. And this chart is very interesting. You see from year over year in comparison to the methodologies and the different interactions that consumers are having from a banking perspective. No surprise that you see mobile banking and online banking kind of topping the charts, particularly when you look at as you compare it to the previous years. Obviously, those other channels are still being used, but they're not being used as much. And this really plays into mobile. I mean, we all recognize that mobile is an integral part of our lives. Actually, my wife likes to think that the mobile is actually literally an extension of me, meaning it's on my hand all the time. And I think this chart is really interesting because what it's really saying is that if we look at that mobile device, on average, a consumer is probably spending about 3.5 hours typically on their mobile device. And what we're seeing is that, year over year, that has dwindled down. So the browser actually on that phone has kind of been sidelined. It's only 10% of it's getting actual airtime versus the apps are making a huge, huge percentage of that. And when you look at it, about 50% of that time is really being spent on social and entertainment. If we drill down even further, if you just look at the entertainment aspect and include YouTube in that, that's roughly about 20% of that time, which is about probably 45 minutes a day. And if you compare that to just last year, that's a growth of 240%. So that means, and that will be equivalent to of every U.S. consumer watching an additional TV sitcom. So it's amazing how much of our eyes are on these devices. And what I'm really the message I'm trying to give to you here is that mobile, and therefore extending that to mobile banking, is going to be very prevalent as we move forward. And we want to make sure that that interaction we're giving to those consumers are going to be the best that they can get from your mobile app that you have on your phone. Now, as we said, those interactions are growing. We've heard from some of the different presenters over the last day and a half that those interactions have actually increased significantly. If you looked at it kind of, what we say the pre-digital airtime was maybe 3 or 4 times a week. Now we're looking at that being 15 to 20 times per month. Sorry, that's 3 to 4 times per week. And then the feedback in some of the surveys are coming back is that those experiences are just not that great. And I don't know who was here yesterday when Justin presented from Braintree, kind of the great analogies he was showing, though I don't have any bar jokes, I apologize. But really, 71% of those consumers are just looking at doing something very transactional with a bank. It's not really an interaction. And in a lot of cases, what we're finding is that those consumers really don't complain. They're unhappy, but they're actually not letting the banks know. And key to obviously keeping and retaining those bank customers are very important because without a loyal bank customer, they're going to move to another bank. And again, as a business, that's something that you do not want to have, is to lose. It costs a lot of money to not only attract, but also to retain. And retaining those customers is a good investment on the bank's part. So if we looked at those user expectations, through all these digital-led interactions with the bank, the demands are really around that whole consumer experience, right? You want to be able to do that banking anytime, anywhere. You want it to be convenient. You want it to be as frictionless as possible. I don't want to have to, enter card numbers, enter CVV numbers, enter all this stuff that is extremely painful every time I want to go to either channel of where I'm trying to do my banking. And at the same time, I want to make sure those interactions are personalized to me. We've seen, again, a few companies over the last day come up and talk about sort of the whole contextual-based authentication, looking at device reputation, device profiling, everything to help to identify who that user is and build some trust. And actually, that kind of leads into the next part, which is, it's about the trust. So from a banking consumer, I want to make sure my identity is protected. I want to make sure the personal information that I'm giving to the bank or any of the channels I'm interacting with are basically trusted and that information is kept private. And of course, across those, as I'm doing these transactions, I want to make sure that they're secure. Okay? So these are the expectations from a consumer perspective. And when we look at this, our proposition here is that we believe that, and I believe everybody in this room would agree, that really the mobile device has become kind of the core here. It is critical to that omni-channel experience. And really, with this, you're going to, kind of the three things we have here is, no alliteration was meant here, but delight customers, right? So again, you want to provide that rich consumer experience, that frictionless experience. At the same time, again, part of that trust, part of that security, I want to basically disappoint criminals. I want to make sure the bad guys either are not injecting malware, doing man-in-the-middle attacks, disrupting my business and what I'm trying to transact. And of course, that point I touched around about disrupt your competition, from one bank to another, I want to make sure I retain those banking customers in my business. I don't want them to go elsewhere, so I want to make sure that I do all the right things, particularly the first 2 points, to make sure I retain those customers. In essence, actually attract other customers from other banking institutions. So this is a little bit of a very busy slide, but again, what I'm trying to show here is that those mobile trusted identities are core to that omni-channel experience. And the essence here is that if you can think of all these things that we do on a daily basis or a weekly basis in terms of as we go about our daily lives, I'm interacting in ways where I can be leveraging that trusted identity, that mobile device, to carry out a number of different use cases. And again, whether I'm doing online banking, and actually that's the demonstration that Brad's going to show us, is kind of walk through that to give you some context behind it. And then if we're doing mobile payments, or maybe I'm trying to interact with the bank teller, if there's a necessity for me to go into the bank, if I'm at a point-of-sale terminal, if I'm at an ATM kiosk, or if I want to, I'm in the bank and I want to do some sort of contractual signing, maybe I want to use my mobile trusted identity to make that happen. So that's really a good lead-in. Now I want to pause. I want to pass it over to Brad. Brad's going to basically kind of get us started here. The essence here is that we talked about, again, that online banking. And what kind of Brad's going to do right here, he's going to sort of first do kind of a login. This is kind of our AnyBank sample application. And what he's doing, he's kind of just initially logging into the bank. And you can see that he didn't need to enter a password. Our whole part of our company is to try and get rid of passwords. And here, by using strong two-factor authentication, he's basically getting a notification to go to his mobile device. And there, he's logged in. It's actually happened faster than I can speak. Good job, Brad. You'll get that raise I mentioned about on the airplane. So now we're actually in the banking app. And again, he's standing behind his PC or laptop, notebook, and he actually wants to transact. He wants to transfer a large sum of money. Well, that's a pretty big, a lot of money in your account. Anyway, he wants to transfer that money from one account to another. And basically what he wants to do is that, he's not sure that if it's himself or some malware on his desktop PC or a man-in-the-middle attack. And basically, he wants to make sure he sends a secure out-of-band notification with the details So that's the transaction details. And of course, you found that there was a bad guy doing it. It wasn't actually you. And he actually kind of canceled the request, and you can see you get an alert. So again, there could have been a transaction that's happening. It wasn't him initiated. He basically stopped it from happening. Great job. So let's show it actually, if it's actually him, it's not some bad guy or a piece of malware running in that shared memory space on that desktop PC. So he's going to go ahead and confirm that, proceed with transaction. All the details are going to be sent to his mobile device. And they're presented on the screen. You can confirm that, yes, that's me. I'm trying to transfer $15,000. He's going to hit the green confirm button, big button. You can't miss it. And then there, I mean, the transaction is basically completed. So again, you know, a very safe, very frictionless way of doing this. And again, this is from the channel, like I mentioned, where you're doing on the online access, right? So again, I'm doing on a desktop PC. Now I want to kind of, you know, talk about how we actually transform that to doing it from your mobile device, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of walk through, and we've got some snippets of code, and of course I've got Brad mic'd up here in case I'm not a developer, and I don't pretend to be one, so if I step up on something, Brad's going to fill in for me. But this is just kind of a flow just to give you a sense of, you know, first, of course, you have to generate that trusted identity on a mobile device, and how do we do that? So there's a couple of things here. I mean, obviously, you're going to have to authenticate to the bank. You're going to probably use a username. You may use a password, whatever the bank has set you up. You're going to basically, you know, request that soft token through the backend server and the bank's web application. You're going to basically request that soft token. You're going to return that. We have a mobile SDK running on the phone, and the app is going to basically generate that identity. It's going to register it on the backend server. So putting this into kind of some code, again, you know, using RESTful-based APIs, JSON in this case, what we're doing is we're setting up a very small number of objects and code to basically go through this process of generating that trusted identity. So, you know, you need a serial number and activation code that you're going to request from the server. You're basically going to, you know, create that trusted identity on the mobile device through doing a provider generate call. Then you're going to, once you get that created, you're going to go now and push that back to the server. And, you know, there's some quick lines of code to go through that. Obviously here, I've simplified the code. There's no, right, Brad, there's no error handling in this code or anything, but of course you would want to put that in your implementation. But the idea was to show you in a small number of object calls being made, a small amount of code, you can basically generate that trusted identity in your mobile application very quickly. And then, so this would be in the case where once I've generated that trusted identity, now what I'm trying to do is I'm actually going to use it to basically, perhaps on a mobile app, I want to be able to, let's say I want to log in from my mobile device to my bank app server out in the cloud. And so what I would do is I would basically, you know, request that identity, that one-time password, making calls in the application. And again, the idea here is that it's going to provide that login request, and it's going to do it transparently to the user. So again, the idea here is that, you know, the user doesn't need to enter a one-time password, doesn't need to do anything. Transparently underneath within the app, you're going to be able to do that. Again, that's strong second factor, because one, you're going to first initiate it through a username, and then because you have the phone in your possession, right, which is what you have, and then what you know, which is that one-time password, is being transparently communicated back to the back-end bank web server, you're going to be able to authenticate. Then you're going to be able to authenticate the user, and then you can proceed on you know, going about your business. So again, that could have been a login case. It could have been a situation where you're doing an actual secure transaction. So again, a very simple amount of calls. You know, typically that identity is stored in what we call in disk on the device. There's obviously some code to handle that, to pull that from disk to make the call, and then, you know, when that second factor authentication request is made, you're going to, you know, get OTP, you're going to get that identity, and then you're going to basically include that one-time password as part of that trusted identity. So let's look at another case, and it's sort of close to what Brad had did on the video, but again, it's within the banking application. So let's say, for example, you want to go through and you actually want to, say, do some sort of transaction signing. Well, you can actually do that, and here are the steps, right? So let's say you're in your mobile banking app, you want to transfer a large sum of money. Again, you would request that transaction signing from the server. You would basically, proceed to obtain the transactions. And again, the third step was kind of an optional push notification. So for example, you can set it up so that you saw when Brad was doing the demonstration, the push-ups came up as he dropped down his menu, and then he knows that he can just click on that and it's going to open up the application. So in this case, those transaction details would be sent from the server. They'd be presented on the screen of the mobile device, just like you saw when Brad was demonstrating it. And then, the user has to prove that. So typically what you're doing is you're taking that trusted identity, which is a form of some digital identity, you're actually signing it, right, with that. In this case, we showed it with a one-time password. It could be an X509 certificate. But the idea is you're signing that transaction. And then once you're signing that transaction, it goes back to the server, and then basically that transaction is approved, it gets completed, and the job gets done. And then again, here's the code. Again, very simple number of object calls made. You can put this into your application very easily with our REST-based APIs and SDKs, and you can proceed to encode this into your applications very simply, and move on to being able to take this identity and leverage across all those channels that we spoke about. So that's all good, but there's a bunch of security best practices that we found, again, working with customers abroad, that you need to make sure you put in. And it's one of the things I noticed in the presentation the last couple of days, that there wasn't really a lot of this talked about, and certainly don't mean to be talking down to any of the developers, but I think it's good to make sure you have these as you develop your application and you're building security into them. So obviously, big thing is, great, you've got that trusted identity in your phone, but if you just kind of leave your phone on the open and somebody grabs it, or it's not PIN protected, or you're not using some of the fingerprint Touch ID capabilities built into some of the mobile devices. Again, those are not necessarily security, they're both convenience, but they are providing some form of protection. Of course, the key thing is there's always confidential secure data, and what we found is, typically there's a lot of customers or that we come across, or they want to say, hey, okay, how are you protecting that information? So you want to make sure that's very well protected, and there's a couple of little tidbits there in terms of not where to store information and things to do. You want to basically be able to, that data that's at rest, you want to be able to protect those seed values, those X509 certificates on those devices. So you want to make sure you can basically encrypt them, make sure there's no tamper-proofing that's happening. And then, of course, you want to consider the impact of jailbroken or rooted devices, and that's always kind of a bit of a policy thing. But again, it's up to the bank to proceed with that. And of course, you want to make sure you have secure connection. So again, the connection we've had from the phone to the back-end web server is that, yeah, that's over an HTTPS TLS connection. And the last point is a bit of kind of tongue-in-cheek. I mean, if everybody, I think, knew about the iOS 9 breach on the Apple Store, I mean, clearly, if there were some best practices done there, you could have probably avoided that altogether, that breach. And then here's a list of, just some best practice. OWASP is a great resource. The Android, the iOS, those are great checklists of best practices that you should follow. And then, I mean, of course, this is kind of like beating our chest a little bit, but I mean, seriously, this is something that we have had, our solutions deployed worldwide, works with a lot of the top banks, and we've got this pretty much deployed worldwide, and it's a proven use case that's working. So in summary, we're talking about mobile devices. I think I really believe this is core to trusted identities. Trusted identity is going to be, of course, essential to omni-channel experience. And again, in adopting the Entrust mobile SDKs will simplify the development. We showed you how quickly it's easy to do that. And then to ensure security, it's definitely something you want to implement. So thank you very much, and we're still going to continue to be here at our booth, so we welcome you to come in and talk to us. Thank you very much.